Okay, welcome to the second real world project. This time we've got a music video in 4K and we're going to go through all of that start to finish. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get our conform started, and this time it's an XML. It's going to be quite a simple sanitized version of an XML. Nothing's going to go wrong with it. We'll go over more advanced XML troubleshooting techniques later on, but for now we're just going to take an XML, we're going to conform, and we're going to check with an offline reference file. So the first thing we're going to do is make our bins. And this is a relatively simple project. We'll have brushes, we'll have our timelines, and we'll have our offline. Of course, as we're working, we want to keep everything organized, so we have places to put everything. Then we're going to go through, make sure our rushes bin is active, go into the edit panel, and then we're going to right click and choose timelines, import AAF/EDL/XML. We're then going to navigate to one of the two XMLs that you've downloaded. Now, I've provided the files here in 4K, and I understand that not every machine can work with 4K DNxHR. That's fine. I've also provided a 1080 version as well, so if you're working on a MacBook or a laptop or a system that's not quite up to spec for a grading rig, for example, there is a 1080 alternative, and the resolution is the only difference here. I'm going to go through the 4K version, hit open, and here we have all of our settings that we should be familiar with by now. These are transcoded DNxHR 444 files with a watermark. I was unable to get agreement to use the raw R3D. However, these DNX files do contain the IPP2 decode, so we are working essentially with red IPP2 material. So we're going to import our main edit resolve. We're going to give it a name, and this is going to be back to me, which is the name of the music video, and then main edit. In the real job, there were a few different timelines when the client was basically building up and basically giving me selects to grade, and then he finished his edit afterwards, but what we've got here is the finished version. We're not going to go through that. We're going to use our sizing information, automatically import, ignore file extensions is not necessary here, and then we're going to hit OK. Now, these files have moved, so we're going to hit yes to search a new folder, and we're going to go to wherever it is, projects, back to me, Udemy Real World Project, and the folder you want for the 4K clips is the watermarked clips folder. The folder you want for the 1080 files is the 1080 files folder, and they're both watermarked, I'm afraid. And then we hit OK. And then we have everything automatically imported into our rushes folder. We're going to grab the timeline at the bottom, and we're going to take that into our timelines folder, so we have everything nice and organized. We're not going to wonder where our timeline has gone. And now we have a timeline here in Resolve. My logo pops up in one or two places in this edit, and that's because where my logo is in this edit is where stock footage from, I think it was Pond 5 or Video Beats was used, and obviously I cannot legally redistribute stock footage items that were purchased from another site. Which is fine. They were fairly low quality Rec 709 bits of stock footage, just bits of like London cityscapes that weren't great, and to be frank, they kind of got in the way of the grade a bit, so we're much better off without them for this exercise. So now what we're going to do, we're going to go and find our offline file, and we navigate to your main folder for this Udemy Real World Project 2 music video, and you're looking for the file which is called back2me_offline, and we then add as offline reference clip to our offline bin. We can keep this anywhere, and we can't put it on the timeline if it's an offline file, but the important thing about keeping things organized is that we don't then spend 5 minutes looking for it if we've misplaced it somewhere, so we want to make sure that we keep this in here. We'll then go back to the edit panel, we'll right click our timeline, we're going to choose timelines, link offline reference clip, and back to me _offline_MJF. And then that will be fine, and what we have is an offline file, and we can now go through and we can check our timeline. So what we do is we go through, we hit the down arrow key to go to the next cut, or the up arrow key to go to the previous cut, and we go through and we check one by one every edit that we have, and make sure that between these two viewers, we're seeing the same image, we're seeing the same frame. The viewer on our right obviously is our timeline viewer. The viewer on our left is our source or offline viewer. Here it's set to offline. We click the symbol and hit the offline checkerboard. And as long as these two are the same, our conform is correct. It's how we know we've got the correct timeline in Resolve, and we're working with the correct version of the edit. And most importantly, we know that when we finally render out and send this back to our client, we know we're giving them the correct material, we're giving them the edit that they want grading, even if they may have if they could have accidentally sent us the wrong edit. That happens sometimes. So we need to go through and check it with the offline and make sure that everything is correct. And we've got a kind of, I don't know if it's hip-hop music video. I graded this, but I never actually heard the song. Isn't that funny? That's the kind of often the way it goes in post-production. Especially in color grading, you don't always get the soundtrack. And we just have to go through and we have to check absolutely everything. Now we've got really nice footage to work with here. We've got footage that was shot on a Red Epic with one of the newer sensors. I can't remember exactly which one it was, but it was IPP2. So here we have the LG310 decode with IPP2 color space. We're going to go through and make sure that everything is correct. There's some really nice striking colors here. We can make this very nice and colorful. These wides of these people here dancing against the wall, that was a very fun shot to work with. We need to keep an eye out for things like these red shirts and these yellow shirts. Very strongly artificial, materials with very strong artificial colors often can be troublesome. So we just need to keep an eye on those. And here we move into the house. Now, the outside material on the street and in the basketball courts, that all turned out really nicely. The house was not ideal. The house has some challenging aspects to it, and we'll go over that when we reach it. But designing a look for the house will be quite awkward. It won't come out looking quite as good as the rest of the film because the location has its limitations. There are certain close-ups. This is a really nice close-up here. This is a nice one. This is nice. This is very nice. It's the wider shots in the house which cause problems because they're not ideal. This is a nice one. Contrary to what you might think, that big green spot in the background is not green screen. It's just the way that corridor is lit. And then we have the final shot. Oops. And there we go. So this conform should be fairly clean. I've gone through and made sure that you're getting a nice clean basic conform, so we're not going to go straight into fixing a faulty conform to begin with. What I will do at a later date is I'm going to make a few exercises with these projects and the previous, well, with all the projects I've developed so far, and I will give you conforms with varying problems, which you can then, as extra credit or optional task, you can then tackle and take care of yourself. For the time being, the purpose of this exercise is to go into grading and how we might think about grading this project. It's not to go through and perform a load of problem solving on a conform. That's something we'll cover later. Okay, excellent. So that's a quick recap on how we do a basic XML conform. It's a very basic, very clean XML. The edit's been brought down to a single track. There's been a very nice, very clean pre-grade operation applied to all of this, which is when we get everything in order. We get things down to 1 or 2 tracks. We get rid of overlapping clips. We get everything in order. And that's been done quite nicely. So in the next video, we're going to go over how we might decide on a look for this project, and then after that we're going to dive straight into the big long videos where we start grading everything. So click on through to the next lecture once you're ready. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our look development phase of this project. So what we've done, we've got our conform ready, and now we're in the color panel down here. And we're going to pick out some projects, we're going to pick out some shots even to work on. Now I've gone through and I've gathered some of my own reference material, some of which was hinted at by the client, some of which I've found. The main influence on this video and the way the grade actually turned out was this video here by DJ ColGRad and quite a few other people. I think it was kind of an ensemble thing. And we're going for this very bright colours, so very bright greens, very bright reds, very bright blues, like not primary colours, but very distinct colours. So what we can take from this is the very strong green in the background, the very strong red of this shirt, the blue of this jacket, the yellow of this shirt, the purple here, we pick these colours out individually and bring them up as basically as high as we can get them. We make them as strong as we can get them, all, and this is really important, whilst preserving our skin tones here. We can't let the skin tones of our actors go crazy, and that's where most of the work is going to come into here, is going to be building skin keys, so that we can make strong stylized adjustments here without making the skin go crazy. So we've got a few things. We've got one main reference for the interior, which is a later shot from the same video, and I don't mind telling you, trying to keep the content of these screen grabs tasteful whilst going through mainstream pop videos is actually quite a challenge. We have a lot of swimsuit nonsense going on in videos like this, and obviously I can't really put that into a course because it's not really appropriate for an education context. But I managed to find a few frames which aren't, let's say, disappointing culturally. Cool. So we've got this nice warm look here, and in the final grade this was the chief inspiration. We've got this nice warm look, we've got very nice warm skin, a slight pink hue in the highlights, and then very strong reds. Other colours are strong, but there's still the kind of orange warm wash going over them. And that's what we're going to try and preserve in this scene back here. So, let's go and find our wall shot again. And this is also another good one to try this look. What we'll do is we're just going to test out our look. We're going to make some stills. We'll pretend we've sent them off to the client, and then in the next video, we're going to come back. We're going to then start with our grade proper. So let's start with the ColGRad look first. Or, yeah, ColGRad, I think. Okay, so first off, let's just take a look. Let's take a look at the overall contrast here. A few dark bits. It doesn't look like anything really touches absolute black or absolute white, but it's still quite high contrast. We do appear to be losing some detail on the highlights of his jacket here. And the red is strong, but it is actually brought back a bit. The strongest colours here are the highlights on the top of the green bushes on this kind of topiary maze here. And then we've got strong blue at the edge of the sky. There's not a lot of sky in our project, so the sky's not too relevant, but we're looking at these strong greens, these strong reds and everything, and of course keeping our skin tones under control throughout. We've got a very strong red back there and a very strong artificial blue back there. So when we've got these artificial colours, these artificial fabrics, we're going to try and bring out these colours. So first off, let's do our basic primary. And we will start now that's looking good. I think what I will do on this first node is I might just introduce a little bit more of a squeeze down to the shadows and just give us a little bit more of that detail. I want these kind of black trousers and these black caps here to be a little bit more, there we go, otherwise they look a little bit washed out and pale. Although I want to be careful about making the contrast on the faces here too strong, so maybe just a lighter touch there, and then a tiny little bit up with the mids. Cool. That's obviously too much. There, right, that is looking good. Then what we can do is we can wang up our saturation. Now if we bring saturation up globally, some things get in a good place, but what we find is red in particular, red and magenta in particular, become much stronger, they become much stronger than other colours much more quickly. So we can't get the look we're after just by whacking up the saturation globally. What we want to do is bring the saturation up until we are happy with the skin tones, and then we're going to make secondary corrections for all of these other colours here, and we're going to bring this out, and we're going to really bring it out and get that good. So I would say that is looking nice for the skin tones. The next thing I want to do then is start with a balance pass and make sure that our colour balance is okay. Now this looks alright. It is perhaps looking a little bit cool. Slight push to the yellow there. We might just bring the saturation up a little bit more. Okay, I'm feeling like their skin tones are looking a little bit yellow there, so the first thing we'll do before we move on to all of the artificial colours is we'll take care of the skin tones. Now this was shot in a red. We should have a pretty good time doing this. Yeah, you can see just how far into yellow the skin tones are. Now we're getting interference from the background, but that's not necessarily too bad of a thing. We definitely want to get rid of this yellow shirt, so we're going to bring our high saturation down until we get rid of that yellow shirt. We want to handle this yellow shirt separately. Okay, that's looking a little bit messy, so let's just see what we can do. We'll clean the black. Oh, that's clean white. We'll clean the black here. Okay. Now we've got some interference from the background. That's okay with the kind of look we're going for. We can actually change this yellow to a more reddish colour, and we do get this kind of overflow in other projects as well. This is a Beyonce video, and we'll go through a bit of this look later on. This is a very kind of red cyan look with this very yellow dress in the centre, but what you'll notice here is these red bricks, these red skin tones, these red bits on the rusted out car, these are all very similar, and that's because the key for the skin tone here would have hit the skin, it would have hit the red brick, it would have also hit the car. So you get this kind of two-tone, this kind of cyanotype two-tone look. And whilst in a perfect world, maybe we want to isolate the skin perfectly, in fact, this has worked in our favour. Even some of these white columns that should be white or very pale yellow, I've even gone pink. So in the real world, we do get this kind of overflow when we're dealing with this. So what we can do now is we can push it a little bit closer towards red. And we want to be careful of making it pink. Obviously green is wrong. So then we'll just bring our saturation up, and we obviously don't want it to go crazy. If we're going to make everything else colourful, skin tones like this are not okay. What we need to do is just bring it up. We could ever so slightly drop the mids. And then what I might just do, some of the shadows, so the underarm here, in the nape of the neck here, near the beard and in the neck here, some of the shadows looking a little bit glowy, and on the side of his face. What I then might be tempted to do is just bring the shadows in the skin tone. Yes, we have them there. And just bring them back under control a little bit. Whereas they were looking a little bit glowy before to me, so I'll just bring them back. And now we have, so quite pale and quite yellow. And now we've got a more redder skin tone, which looks better to me, a bit more colour to it. Excellent. So now I'm going to move on to handling all the different artificial colours here. And this is essentially the same technique multiple times, but we'll go through it. So the first thing I'm going to do is deal with this yellow shirt. Now we can get quite a clean key, and it's okay for us to get a bit of spill over here. In fact, he doesn't go anywhere near the left side of the screen. What we can then do is draw a shape around the flower, and make sure the sunflower doesn't get in the way. And we'll just track that. And now what we've done, we've got a clean key on the shirt here, and our sunflower's not getting in the way. A little bit of spill over here, a little bit over here, nothing too serious. What we will do is we will make sure this is quite nice and quite colourful. That's offset, that's the wrong wheel. And now you can begin to see how I'm approaching this very colourful look. The contrast here is quite fierce. I personally don't like how they've flattened out high values at the top. I think destroying information like that looks a bit naff. I don't like how the highlights have come out on the jeans down here. I don't like how the sky is gone. I don't like losing all the detail on the clock face there, or the watch face there. I don't like the fact that, I think that's Justin Bieber, his hair appears to disappear into the sky. So it's certainly of a style, not one that I would choose to impose upon our current project though. Cool. And now, before and after, we've got a nice bright clean yellow shirt there, which is a really nice bit of detail to have. Now we'll go over red later on. What we'll do next is we're going to take care of our greens, and rather than pick with the eyedropper on this one, I'm going to dial it in by hand because I think it's going to be easier that way. What we'll do is soften that up and pick our green, and then we're just going to bring up low sat until we get rid of and maybe bring up low luma. Right, and we'll clean out the black, and then we'll just blur it out, soften it, so if something goes wrong it's not too obvious. Looking at that, there's some greeny blues that I'm missing, so what I'll do is I'll stretch that out and shunt it over. There we go. So now we have a reasonably good key in our greens. We're going to dial that up. Now if we actually take a look at the ColGRad video, and let's take a look at our vector scope here. The colours are very strong, the red is very strong, although bizarrely it looks quite subdued to me. But the greens down here, they're quite yellow, but they're also very, very strong. And our greens aren't nearly that out there yet, so we can really begin to push this. The only thing we need to be careful of is if this might start to expose some chatter in our key, because down at the bottom there was some chatter. We've got a little bit of interference, bits of mould and moss on the pavement here, or possibly the sidewalk, depending on where you're from. So what we'll just do is we'll put a garbage mat down here. I don't think that needs tracking. Actually, that does need tracking. Fair enough. We just want to make sure that we do not have any visible chatter. And I don't see any, even right up close I don't see any, so that's cool. I wondered what that was. That's someone's smartphone on the wall changing suddenly. So our green is looking good. We can still push this a little bit further. We don't want it to go completely radioactive. Keep in mind that this is like a, it's a highlight, it's a very bright colour. But we can make it quite bright and quite colourful. And now what we'll do is we'll do the same with the red. Now the red is going to take a little bit more because in some places it's okay, in other places we want to bring it up. Distinct reds like this are very easy to key. What we might just do, there we go, clean that up a little bit. There we go. Now there's a little bit of an issue just to keep an eye out. So there's this part of the skin which is quite glowy. Let's just see if we have, yeah, none of that is actually there. So what we can do, let's just keep an eye out. So we want to just bring it up until we get rid of that little splotch, because otherwise that's one of our dancer's ears and we don't want that to start glowing. That's going to look wrong. Then we'll just bring up our clean black until we're okay. So we've got a good clean key on our red. What we want to do is bring that out as far as we can. Now, in fact, what we might want to do is just bring some of the shadows under control. We have red going right out up here. And going right that far isn't normally a good idea. What we could just do is use our sat v sat curve and bring it back under control. And that's fine. What we might do is kind of level our saturation out a bit, bring things which are less saturated up. Now red naturally catches the eye, red and yellow naturally catch the eye. So he's a good natural focal point here. He's also giving us his move, so he's the focus of the shot, so making him very bright and very colourful like this works. That's a good decision. And you can now see how we're beginning to approach this style of look. Our red here seems to be stronger. In fact, it is. So now we'll just do our final one, and that's going to be the blue. I'm going to leave the magenta on this kind of graphic back here alone, because I like having a contrast between different colours. It makes things more interesting. And also I don't want the warm colours in the background here to come out too much, because again, this green backdrop is nice. Green and red, green and yellow, they're nice colour schemes. I don't want everything in the background to come screaming out, because our focus is the actors. Our focus is, of course, the actors and the dancers we have here in the foreground. So, final one, and I'll do this by hand again. Okay, and that's good. We don't want the blue to come screaming out too much. We've got enough colour in here. What we might just do is add just a little bit. What I like here is the blue versus yellow colour scheme we have on our dude on the right. And we might just bring that up a little bit. I like how that's hitting this sleeve. I like this detail. I like the flower. I especially like the yellow jacket and blue shirt, and you don't really see this guy very much in this shot. He's kind of hanging around on the edge, but still I quite like how his jacket's being treated there. Cool. So this is a basic breakdown of this look. We might go back to skin and make it just a little bit more colourful to keep up. Then in the final pass, what we'll do is we're going to keep an eye on any awkward glowing bits on the nose, on the ear, in the webs of the fingers, for example, and bring them back under control. Now, I'm quite happy with how that's all gone. I would say it does feel to me like it's lacking just a little bit of contrast. So I'm just going to bring that down. That's more like it. That I'm quite happy with. I'm going to bring the highlights up a smidge. Now, I just want to make sure that I'm not clipping channels too badly here, because that will cause problems later. I will then get the red curve, and I'm just going to bring that highlight back down under control a bit. There we go. And there we have our first look developed. That's quite nice. In fact, it's very close to how it came out for the final version of the project, so I'm quite happy with that. I would be satisfied in presenting this to a client for feedback. So we're going to go into our LD stills bin. And of course I made a bin for references, and now I'm making a bin for LD stills. I'm going to grab stills, and here we have our first developed look. Now I might think that these highlights on the skin look a little bit silvery, but we'll come back to that later on. We'll see what the client thinks. So that's our first look here. And then we've got two more to go. We'll go for this one, And this time we'll try a look that's something more like this. Now, I think we'll get quite close to this. It will be better on the original red when you have to pull skin keys like this. But we'll see. We have this red shirt here and these blue jackets. We don't have anything this yellow. We've got one guy in a yellow jacket later on, for which this look might also work. In fact, I think that's a better subject. Let's go and look. Let's use this shot instead. Okay, so we'll do our basic primaries first. We just want to keep highlights under control. Obviously, whilst I like how the mids are turning out there, this on his shoulder is too much. There's a little bit of an imbalance in our shadows here. Tiny little bit elevated red, depressed blue. I'm pretty confident in sorting this out in this node here, no need for a second one. I might just do a little bit of a contour adjustment in the mids there. Cool. And then of course, a healthy dose of vitamin saturation. So this is beginning to look good, maybe a little bit warm. I'll pare that back. We're going to get quite a cool red cyan look here, and obviously we've got this yellow jacket in common. Looking at this, I might bring the mids down and the highlights up, get that more, get more of a contrast between the mids and the highlights, and bring our shadows down a smidge. And that's looking good. So now this is your basic garden variety color contrast. This is what we might be tempted to call teal and orange, although in this case it's more kind of cyan and pink. So what we will do is we'll do our primary balance. Our primary balance looks pretty good. I think that's more or less perfect. This is a clean white highlight. This is the highlight on this dude's shoulder. And across all three channels it's pretty even. I think our primary balance is fine. Cool. So now our contrast is in the right place. What we'll do is we'll move on to building our look, and what we'll do first is key out the skin. And we can be quite zealous with this. We want to separate out all the warm colours. Now I'm just a little bit wary of these spots in the foliage. I don't want kind of weird things going on in the foliage, but I also don't want his beard to turn cyan with the rest of him not being there, so let's just see what else we can do. Okay, we'll see how they go. I don't want bits of odd bokeh going red up there. Let's just see how this moves. Okay, mercifully, simple shot. What we can do, I'm okay with the basketball hoop actually. And then we'll just track that on. And then of course invert that, and now we've gotten rid of our awkward bits. Just one or two little things here, they should be okay. So in this look, all the skin tones, all the orange tones are tilted towards pink, and everything else is tinted cyan. So what we'll do is we'll add just a little bit of magenta in these highlights, not too much. When we surround a warm colour with something else, we change our perception of that colour. If we were to surround them with cyan or green, we would naturally make them appear to be more pink, and it's the way our eyes work and the way in which we perceive colour contrast. So we don't need to add a huge amount of magenta at this stage, because when we add the cyan around it, that's also going to naturally make them look more magenta, look more pink. We're going to hold Alt and hit O to make an outside node, and now this is the opposite of the key we had before, and here we're going to push in our kind of greeny cyan. Now that looks not too super colourful, so we'll pull that down, and now we have a nice pinkness going on. We'll push that up. I mean, what we could do is we could push that down a bit actually. And now we have that kind of faded magenta quality of the skin tones. But of course we want to preserve the cap and the jacket and our good friend the basketball hoop up here. So the cap and the jacket is going to be easy to get rid of. And now there we go. So what we also want to do, what we'll do is we'll right click and we'll add a key mixer. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add a node, and we're going to connect our node tree up like this. So now what we have are keys from 2 nodes going in. Now the reason we're going to separate this out, we've got our key for the skin, and now we're going to get a key for the yellow jacket and the red baseball cap only. The reason we're doing this is because we're then later going to use the key, the reason we're doing this is we're then later going to use the key for the jacket and the baseball cap independently of the skin, but we still want it to be excluding them from the cyan treatment here. So we can combine these 2 keys together for when we need both of them, but then we can go back and work with one of the keys that we've pulled. And that sounds a bit odd at first, but just bear with me and we'll go through that demonstration. So now on this node, I'm going to pull a key. I don't want anything desaturated in here. I want to keep my shadows under control as well. Bright, high saturation, wide. There we go. And then I'm just going to... I want to be careful about the shadowy bit I've got on his skin. There's a little bit of bounce light, and I can just minimize that there, but I don't want to introduce weird dancing patterns on his chest or anything. So now we've got our... give me a second. Oh, I see what I've done. I've excluded the cap. Okay, well I definitely don't want to get the face in there. Okay, we can't do this with just one key. What we're going to do, we're going to right click the key mixer, and we're going to say add one input. We're going to change tack here because it's not quite working. We're going to get only the yellow jacket, which is simple enough. That was easy. Now we're going to make another node. And now this third node down here, number 6, is going to be just the baseball cap. Oh, I didn't know you could do that. That's cool. Okay, that's very cool. That's a new one. So now we're going to key out the baseball cap, which is going to be dead easy. Clean white, a little bit of clean black, a bit of blur. There we go. So now, if we look at this, we now have a good key around everything. So now we've got our baseball cap selected, and we've now got a clean key for our cyan treatment. What we're then going to do, we're going to make a new serial node. We're going to drag the key from node 5 over to this new one, so we're getting the qualification for the yellow jacket and we're bringing it forwards. We're going to hit this icon here, which is key, and we're going to hit this icon here, which is invert key. What this does is it takes the alpha channel it receives from another node and turns it inside out. By default, we would have worked outside of our original qualification for the jacket. Now, we're working inside of it. We're bringing it forwards and we're working with it again. This way, what we can do is now we can make the jacket quite nice and yellow. Just like it is in this Beyonce video here. We've got the pinkish skin, we've got the cyan background, we've got the yellow jacket. And then what we'll do is one more node, and we're going to bring forward our selection from our baseball cap, go to key and hit invert, and now we've got the qualification for the baseball cap, and we'll just hit that. And we just want to be very careful that we don't clip our red channel, so we'll also bring the red channel back under control. That just brings things up a little bit. So now we have those nice bright colours cutting through the cyan wash. We have the pinkish skin, and we have the overall contrast ratio as well. So those are our two main looks that we've now developed for the outside. What we'll do is we'll grab a still of that, and then we've got one last thing to do. We've got to develop our look for the interior. Now the interior is difficult. We're going to have to do our best with the wider shots. They're not ideal. This detailing up here, I mean, when we add black bars, most of this will go, but still the kitchen looks a little bit basic and plasticky. This hallway shot's not ideal. We do much better with the closer angles inside the house. I saw all of these rushes. There was some really weird light refraction stuff going on with glass props. They had these big kind of champagne flutes and things. And some of the highlights were like fierce burning magenta. It was very strange. Some very odd behaviours of light in some of these rushes, so it was actually quite challenging to edit with. I did not edit this project. The client edited this project and I graded it, but the client showed me the process and I could see how difficult some of the material was to deal with. So now we're going to develop our final look, which is of course back from ColGRad again. And this time we're going to go for the warmth here. We're not going to go for the brightness. It's interior. It's meant to be kind of late evening. We're meant to have like a kind of a warm golden sunset kind of a feel. Going for highlights like this wouldn't be entirely appropriate for the mood we've got here. So let's get started. We can introduce a bit more contrast, but we don't have an enormously contrasty subject to work with, so obviously putting it right up there would be naff. And I've only just noticed, and this is embarrassing, I've got my scope set to HDR. There we go. Can you guess what kind of project I was working on before this video? Luckily, the mapping is more or less the same. We're going up to things being very bright. It's not massively significant at this phase. I should have sorted that out before, and you have my apologies for that mistake. However, it's not a serious one at this phase of the grade. Right, so what we'll do... I quite like crushing the blacks down here and getting some nice detail out of that hair. Okay, cool. So let's get the eyes. Cool. Now let's bring up the saturation. Okay, so this naturally leans itself to warmth. It's got quite warm lighting. And what we want to do is we just want to bring it out. We want to go for this kind of red. Okay, so we'll warm this up. And then we're going to have to keep our shadows clean. The hair is going a little bit orange, and there we go. I quite like the cool, warm contrast there, but it's not going to carry out across the entire scene. What I like is that kind of jet black hair and the orange shiny bits, the orange highlights. I think that's very effective. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to see just how far I can push this without making the skin look weird. And we're approaching this kind of look. This is a little bit juicy and colourful. I'm not going to push it quite that far, but we can get quite close just with 2 nodes. There we go. Now let's take a look. I might just wang up the saturation globally. Okay, if I do that, the skin goes bananas, so let's not do that at all. Let's bring it up slightly. No, I don't like that either. Let's play around with the contrast a little bit. There we go. Make it a bit more darken, a little bit more intimate with the contrast. Now, there's eye glitter here. I wonder if I can bring out the glittery eyeshadow. That's cool. I wonder. Let's take a look at this and see what we can do. So... let's just... No, that ain't gonna work. Okay. Fair enough. Worth a try, though. If we could have isolated the eyeshadow or the glitter there, we could have made that shine really bright and made it much more obvious, but I don't think we're going to get a key that clean on this footage. Which is fair enough, can't win them all. I think we'll just finish this off with a little bit of vignetting. And this one's fairly basic. Warmer looks are a bit more basic because you tend to kind of just warm things up a bit and then make sure the shadows are nice and neutral. There we go. We just frame it. It might be a little bit heavy-handed, actually. Let's just push that over. Oh, there we go. There we go. And now we have... Nice. Quite a nice warm look. We've taken inspiration from this. We've not got that kind of the bloomy white shadows. We've not got the crazy pink highlights. The skin isn't super orange. But we've taken our cues from this, and I'm happy to now show that to the client. So I'm going to put this in our look development stills. Right, so we have now finished our look development phase here. We've got 3 looks. We'd go ahead and do an extra 2 or 3 in a real-world project, but, well, in a real-world contract. This being an exercise, 3 is enough. I already know that the client chose this look. Spoilers. And whilst this is okay, it just doesn't match the general energy going through the whole thing. It's much more edgier, it's kind of more downbeat, and that doesn't really fit the... That just doesn't fit the project. This look, this kind of very bright, very colourful, everything coming out, really nice strong colours, really nice strong skin tones. This look is a much better fit. And then we kind of go into this kind of more subdued. When the mood changes a little bit in these scenes, it's more subdued, things are slower. We don't have the same energy, we don't have the same movement in the house. It's, you know, it's later on at night, people are tired, it's the end of the day. Okay, that's too much. So now, we'll send this off to our client, or at least we'll pretend that that's what we're doing. And then, what we'll do is we'll start on our first pass of the grade. Now, I'm already going to tell you that the client is going to choose this look and this look. So we're now ready to go ahead and start with our first pass of the grade on this project. Click on through to the next lecture when you're ready.